Hi, I'm Franklin, and this is Law School Strategy, how I graduated from law school with a job. How I graduated from law school is a series of interviews with practicing attorneys and legal professionals to find out more about their journey. The purpose is for you to hear about how other legal professionals became employed and started their career, or in some cases, relaunched their careers following law school or a later stage in their professional career. It's not just young lawyers that we'll be talking with, but attorneys across all levels of experience and practice areas. The purpose isn't try and prove the legal job market is perfect, because it's not, or convince you it's easy to get a job and there are a ton of jobs out there, because there aren't. However, I do hope you gain some insights, ideas, tips, or other pieces of advice that can help you and your law school strategy. Because I do believe that if you work hard, follow the advice I share and these guests share, you'll be closer than ever to graduating from law school with a job. On this episode, we have attorney Brian Focarino from I meant to ask you. Dang it. Are you actually from San Francisco? Is that the appropriate thing to say?
Oh, well, I work in Silicon Valley, so I work in the San Francisco Bay Area, but originally from the DC area.
Okay. So where do you currently live then? Do you live in the San Francisco?
I live in Palo Alto, which is sort of in the middle of Silicon Valley.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll just say that's where you're from. Okay, so Brian, why did you go to law school?
So I initially, I think as a little kid, I had always known that I wanted to go to law school and knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. I was pretty interested in gray and, and not having things be totally black and white. And then my choice to go to law school was solidified. My junior year of college, I was in a lecture. I was a linguistics undergrad, and I was always really interested in language and language ownership and who got to say things and who got to sort of own, phrases and these things that are otherwise sort of thought of as the common good, or sort of the population of the people. And we had a linguistics lecture where a trademark professor came in, who had just written a law review article about what she called the grammar of trademarks. And it was pretty interesting about how courts sort of treat, how people sound in the classroom or in the courtroom and all of these other things. And, and one company wants to sort of own this word in connection with this thing, and another company wants to own this word in connection with this thing. And when is that confusing and when is that not, based on how people cognitively understand and process language. And that was when I was sort of like, that's totally what I want to do I guess when I grow up. So I always sort of knew, and then I was sold, I would say, after that.
Nice. So what did you study before law school, and did you kind of had an idea that you wanted to go to law school? So what led up to that? What were your undergrad degrees in, or if any masters or any other programs that you did in conjunction with law school even?
Yeah, I did my undergrad in linguistics, and I was really, really interested in applied linguistics. So basically how linguistic science informs sort of practical, non-theoretical aspects of day-to-day life. So everything from language-based discrimination to, you sort of name it, to psycholinguistics, they call it. So speech aphasia and things like this, and how we sort of teach people to speak and treat that in various populations. And then after law school, or after undergrad, I went to grad school actually for applied linguistics as well. And by that point, I knew that I was pretty interested in trademark law. So I did a number of things in my studies that sort of tailored myself towards that. And I wrote my undergrad thesis when I was in college on sort of how linguistic science can better inform the way we do trademark law in courts, and sort of expert testimony and things like that. So I wrote about a thing called the doctrine of foreign equivalence, which is basically the linguistic capabilities courts would assign what they call the reasonable consumer in trademark law. And it was great. So, so it's cool. And I still work with language every single day, and it's neat to sort of be able to tie that language science aspect into my daily practice, which is, trademark and copyright litigation.
Awesome. Yeah. So did you graduate from law school with a job? That's kind of one of the main questions and concerns of every law student or somebody looking to change their career, is where they're going to go. But did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you get that job after law school?
I was fortunate enough to have a job across the country. Actually, I went to law school in Virginia, and now I work in Northern California. And I guess the main way that I got it was I didn't do it through OCI or on-campus interviewing, which is sort of the major way that people, I guess, go about doing that. I actually didn't participate in on-campus interviewing at my school at all, not for sort of lack of interest, just because I was interested in working in Northern California, and I was interested in working in the tech industry for a law firm that focused on tech. And firms sort of would recruit at my school, but it wouldn't always necessarily be for the California office or something. It might be for a DC office or a New York office or something. So my job search was a lot more tailored. I would say towards the beginning of the summer after my 2L year, or 1L, I guess it would have been 1L year. Yeah. I started just sort of specifically applying to the law firms in the offices that I wanted to work for. And I sort of did that through my own process. And then I went through interviews, and I would say that August before my second year, got a summer position, summered after my second year, got a job offer.
Nice. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I've obviously gotten to know you through the ABA, so I know a little bit of your background and some of the work that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about your internships and what the process looked like? Because you have some pretty incredible names obviously attached to your previous experience.
Yeah, I was totally fortunate, and some of it is serendipitous, and some of it is kind of happenstance. But my 1L year and my 1L fall, like I said, I pretty much came into law school knowing that I was interested in trademark and copyright law, and I didn't initially have an inclination as to whether or not I was interested in tech. But I sat down sort of with myself in the fall of my 1L year, and I said, this is the kind of law that I'm interested in practicing, and where would be the most interesting companies sort of in the world to practice that kind of law? So for me, that was basically like, who is being sued for these kinds of issues a lot right now. So I actually really liked this website, lawstudentjobs.net, which I don't even know how I came across it, but I loved it. And it had a lot of in-house summer positions. And I was really attracted to the idea of in-house summer positions, A, because they paid by and large, and B, because in many instances for in-house attorneys, a lot of the attorneys who are in-house had been in firms, right? So they sort of had both perspectives of why they personally went in-house and all this other stuff. So I applied to places like Twitter and the Wikimedia Foundation and Google and Facebook, and I got a call back in particular from Google, and sort of fell in love with the interview process and sort of landed my dream job as a digital media and trademark law intern with them for the summer of my 1L year. And that was just sort of impossible to turn down. So that took me out to Silicon Valley for the first time, actually. And while I was there, it was terrific because a lot of the attorneys who were currently working at Google and who I was working for, Google retained a lot of different law firms. A lot of the attorneys who were at Google had come from a variety of law firms. So there was a lot of candor in sort of going into applying to firms and things like that. And I knew, and I was encouraged to go into a firm right after law school, just sort of for the sheer amount of training that you would get as a junior attorney, whether or not that eventually ended up being your long-term plan. And so I applied to sort of very specific firms, and that's why, for me, working in-house after my 1L year was absolutely the most perfect thing, just because when you're applying, especially to law firms, there's such an information asymmetry of, every firm sort of says that they're good at everything, but you don't really know truly whether or not they're good at things. And you don't know if they are good at something, whether or not they're only good in this office, or whether or not it's one or two partners, or, for me, if I wanted to do IP, whether or not that was sort of more prosecution and counseling, or whether or not that was more enforcement and litigation, or whether or not it was sort of a full shop. So having that sort of candid view from the people I worked for was amazing. So I started applying to law firms, and then at the same time I was applying for an internship during my 2L fall, and then I ended up interning for the chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in D.C. because I also just knew I wanted to do litigation, and I didn't necessarily know whether or not I wanted to clerk, but I knew I wanted to work for a judge just to sort of have the writing experience and also to be able to sort of get writing samples in the event I sort of needed them down the line. And everything sort of came together, and I guess I was able to do both of those things. But yeah, that was sort of the thing is, just asking a lot of questions and asking people sort of where they would apply and why they wouldn't apply to certain places. And if they did, where and that sort of thing. And it substantially helped me narrow down where I was applying to. And as a result, I think I was able to tailor cover letters and stuff just a lot more thoroughly because I was just looking at a much more limited universe of places that I realistically wanted to work.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So can you just guesstimate how many resumes or cover letters you actually ended up sending out over the course of law school for internships as well as jobs once you graduated? You said you kept it kind of tailored, but
they did. But I mean, it's like even when it's tailored, right? It's like it's such a crazy amount. Probably. I probably from my 1L summer, I probably applied to 10 or 12 different internships. For firms, I probably applied to maybe as many as 15. And for interning with the judge, I probably applied to several judges on the same circuit. So I would say probably five or six for them. But so throughout the process, and I don't even know if I sent out, because for one firm, you might still send out different cover letters for different offices just because they have different recruiters. And so, I think for the firm, for example, that I'm at right now, I probably sent 3 cover letters because I was probably willing to work in DC or California or, you sort of want to make yourself as attractive and sort of flexible looking as possible. So saying 15 firms probably actually understates the number of like different tailored cover letters I actually did. That was probably more like 25.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good number. So were there any times that you struggled or faced any challenges in the job search or maybe the internship search?
Yeah, I I think totally. I think that the most arbitrary thing is the law firm recruiting process in particular. I think that for in-house positions at bigger companies, it's a little bit less arbitrary, right? So for my 1L summer, I didn't think it was that arbitrary because you would apply and for big companies in particular, they might hire you into particular groups. And so people, I wasn't ever going to be hired into like an antitrust group, for example, at Microsoft or whatever, because I just wasn't interested in antitrust law. My resume didn't speak to it and things like that. But if you were really interested in a particular kind of law, right, that was sort of more attracted to those companies. For firms, I think it's just, I think it's so hit or miss sometimes. And I think that can be pretty frustrating. I think that some firms say, you really wanted to work in New York, but you went to law school in Atlanta or something. Some firms might just be like, I don't see anything that speaks to your desire to be in New York. You're not from New York. So they might nix you on those grounds, right? Some firms might be like, well, you're not in the top 10% of your class. So you don't go to X, Y, or Z law school, or you're on sort of a secondary law review. You're not on a primary law review. So there are a lot of sort of arbitrary cutoffs, which I think actually could have been conscious choices by you, but maybe for the people who are looking at your resume in a vacuum don't look like conscious choices. So I think that can be very, very frustrating. So of course I would get rejections from firms that I might even consider to have like worse practices than the practice that I currently work for. And you just can't let it get under your skin. So I would say, cast a wide net and keep an open mind. And, the converse is also true where you could be really, really surprised. You could get a call from a recruiter at, a company or a firm or a chambers or something where you thought that they were totally out of your league and they might have just seen something in your resume that they're like, that's awesome. So I guess it goes both ways. It just during the job search process, it feels like it goes more towards the rejection way and less towards the like, oh, I'm collecting all of these acceptances.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think just not taking it personally, I think is the biggest thing that I faced, and I think a lot of folks face.
Great. Yeah, that's excellent advice. So one of the last questions I'll ask you is there any advice that you would share with law students or JDs that are currently studying for the bar? What did you find worked well for you that you might want to share?
So, I mean, I think that the major thing that I would say for law students, and this is, everybody has to tailor it to their own sort of specific thing, but I think that the practice of law, particularly in firms, is getting very specialized. And I think that there's a drive towards being sort of specialized. And I would say, if you have a particular area of law that you're interested in, you really have to sort of show and not just tell that you're interested in it. So your resume should reflect that you're interested in it. Your internship should reflect that you're interested in it. Your law review article should reflect that you're interested. So I would just say, like, that's very, very attractive. And when I'm looking, for example, with like even more junior attorneys to work with me, I want people who are very interested in the kind of law that I do. So I would say that that's sort of the main thing. And having just after graduating and, studying for the bar and then sort of starting at your firm, I would just say continue to sort of do that, right? Just double down on what it is that you love doing. And I think that the big thing for me right now at my firm is don't miss the forest for the trees, right? Because when you're in law school or when you're studying for the bar, especially when you start at a firm and you're billing every 6 minutes of your time, it's so easy to be like, what's the next deadline, or what's, did I finish this reading for this class or whatever? And it's much harder to sort of look up and be like, oh, but did I miss this application for this opportunity that I would really, really love to do, or whatever. So, continue to make time for yourself, because I think it gets just increasingly more difficult. And there's always going to be, some other deadline around the corner. So I would just say, keep a weather eye out and keep at it.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your experiences and some really great insights.
Thank you so much, Franklin, for having me.
And thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe for future episodes of How I Graduated from Law School with a Job.